popping in here. Okay. I'm going to get started. It's 5:01. We just want to make, there's always a lot to run through. And so I want to make sure we've got time. So anybody know? Can you see my my splash screen there? Can anybody have any idea what kind of flower this is?
Arcostaphylos?
Yeah. Arctostaphylos, how we say it.
All right, butchered that.
Yeah, that's all right. Like I said, we constantly, right? So yeah, manzanita flower with a nice bumblebee of some kind on there. Anyway, I'm just gonna really quickly, so we're doing the irrigation intro today, and then whoever signed up for Saturday, we're going to have the in-person, which I'm really looking forward to. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with that, and I get to kind of meet you all, and you guys get to meet each other. And we're gonna, if I forget to say it at the end, maybe a couple of you could bring some mason jars, and we'll do a couple tests. Just quick, we'll fill them up and shake them around and see what comes out of it.
I have a lot of mason jars. Does that count as our homework if we do it on Saturday?
Not really.
Okay.
I'd like to see you kind of get out there and do it yourself. And someplace, maybe a friend has some soil you can use if you don't have any available to you. Yeah, I'd like to see you give it a shot. But this will be a good instruction if we do it together. And then some of you have some experience with that, so it'll be fun to kind of trade information. Let's go to the homework. Let's see. I'm going to share it's going to be a little hard for me to, here we go. I've got the questions here. And then I'm going to share I'm just going to go to my email page and go through some of your guys' homework. I try to respond to your homeworks, but it's hard to roll through them all in one class, right? I'm sure you can imagine. So the share screen, I have to stop share, then do a new share. There's my email, share, and then we're here. Can you guys see my email? Yes, thumbs up. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, so a lot of people had very fast draining soil. Most of the results I got were under 30 minutes, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And let's see, I'm looking for I think it was Nathaniel that actually got some nice ribbons. Okay, can you see that? Can you guys see Nathaniel's got some actual ribbons out of it? And a lot of people were like, oh, they couldn't even get anything going. So that was interesting. Finally, his assessment was, Nathaniel, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, what was your final assessment again?
Well, those ribbons, I think they are like pushing nearly 2 inches, and the clay content's obvious, but my infiltration test went in about 35 minutes. So I got to assume there's some loam there with it.
Yeah, some sand mixed in, and it's moving through there pretty well. Some infiltration tests you'll see, I guess it's just not a standardized thing. Some infiltration tests you'll see online talk about filling the hole up once, let it drain out, then do it again. So that might give you different results. Let's see, Jeanette. Oh yeah, Jeanette. Let's see if we can get this. There we go. I think that might be a little wet to try to perform your ribbon with. If you remember the lady with the Australian accent, she was putting just enough to kind of hold the material together. That looks a little goopy, but you know, it's all, we're just trying to get what we can get. There's Jeanette's hole filled with water, and then it drained really quickly, apparently. Let's see. Drains within less than a minute after the hole has been filled. Wow. Yeah, that's moving really quickly. So, and then, you know, you guys, like we talked, you might have different drainage in different parts of the yard, right? So it's good to keep track, be aware of that too. You can't just dig a hole and expect, and you'll find this out when you start planting, you know, once if you got a sandy area and maybe, who knows, you know, that area has been worked over in the past, it's construction happened, who knows, and then you go dig in another area, all of a sudden you're like, hey, this is taking an hour to drain here. So just be aware that one, you know, if you've got these different zones, it might be wise before you start making plans for your plant selection, you know, to dig holes in each zone and check your drainage. You know, it could be kind of futile. You could be getting the same results, but you also might get something different. So it's wise to kind of err on that precaution. Here's Eric's with the great, oh, you guys, can you see Eric's clogs? And again, the water is just flying through. He's got good moisture, it looks like, and trying to get a ribbon, but the ribbon just would not hold form. So yeah, you got sandy soil. Maggie sent in a thing and it just said, it's sand, you know, and it was very clear by how fast the water drained out of there. So I think I'm finding this interesting that everybody has such sandy soil. Here's Holly's. Yeah, so here's, she says it felt silty, loamy, fast draining soil. Not bad, you know, it seems like kind of a, yeah, by 15 minutes, all the water had drained out. So it's just over and over again. John has some experience with sending soil samples in to Wallace Labs. So hopefully John will show up on Saturday. We can pick his brain a little bit. You guys can talk to each other about that. And I think that would be kind of fun just to hear his experience and his evaluation of the reports.
I wanted to interject just since you're mentioning the soil samples. I was trying to remember the other day because I finally remembered. It's University of Massachusetts. They do a soil sample. You send it over, and it's $20.
Wow, that's very cheap. Yeah.
So yeah.
It depends on. They should tell you what kind of information you're getting, and like if you're Emilio, I know you work in the schools, so sometimes people are growing food at the schools, and you might want to get the heavy metals readout on your soil sample or your lab test, because that would indicate the kinds of things you would grow. I don't have a ton of experience growing food, but I know that that's an important thing to look out for when you're growing food. So yeah, that's just,
I want to make sure I remembered correctly, so I'm going to look it up. I'll post the link on the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think a local one is Wallace Labs that a lot of people use. So thanks, folks. I'm going to move on to talking about irrigation here, just to Oh, I guess the question is, just judging from, I'll just quickly, your folks' texture seemed to relate to your drainage, uh, the speed of the drainage. So there didn't seem to, did anybody have any experience where the texture felt one way and then the drainage surprised you? I'm gonna say that's a no. No? Okay. So yeah. All right, let's move on. I'm gonna unshare my email. You guys have had enough of that. Let's go to the lesson.
Eric, I have a question.
Yeah, yes.
Can we still turn in this assignment? Because I didn't have time to go out and
Yeah,
dig a hole.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
I-
also,
yeah.
Another question that I wanted before I forget, are we gonna be having a test or something that we need to start preparing for?
No, I don't believe there is a test here. So you're in luck. I'm finding, I have to say, I am surprisingly energized by getting these pictures of people digging holes in their garden. I'm I find that quite enjoyable to interact with you guys on your soil tests. And I'm also amused that there's a lot of stuff coming in 10 minutes before class, which lets us all know that we're kind of all busy people, just kind of squeezing it in when we can. And I find that kind of amusing. So here we are. We did our ribbon test. We'll do more of that tomorrow. Let's get on to irrigation. Just make sure you, it says there's a rebate handout in the student materials. Check to make sure the information is current by reviewing SoCal Water Smart. Yeah, so it would be wise of you to double check the websites, make sure they didn't make any changes in the information if we're giving things to you. Yeah, I think that is a matter of course. You should just do that all the time because yes, we created this year, but things change. So let's go to, we did the homework review. Okay. Objectives of this lesson: define, after completing this section, students will be able to define a garden's irrigation needs based on age of garden, plant material, irrigation system, and soil. And those are the four things that are kind of going to dictate things. But irrigation and soil, yeah, those are going to dictate your irrigation plans. Schedule irrigation to mimic seasons, especially wet winters during drought years. And lastly, to change irrigation as garden matures. All right. We talked about this earlier. Can everybody see that it says the community of plants? I'm sharing my PowerPoint. Thank you. Yeah. So we talked about earlier about the community, various plant communities in California. And I think it's there are 5 main ones here. Let me count. Chaparral, coastal sage scrub, oak woodland, desert plant. That's 4. So we focus on 4 here, but there's also riparian, coastal strand, and redwood forest plant communities. You can look these up. There's others. But those are in Southern California. Those are basically what we're dealing with. Let's see. So, it's important to remember that, so as you move these plants around out of their community, you may find different results as far as their drought tolerance. So drought tolerance, wrote a little note to myself so I could make it clear. Drought tolerance has a direct relationship to where these plants originate. So if you're bringing a plant from coastal Northern California and you're plopping it down here in Southern California, Silver Lake on a southern facing slope, you're going to have different results than a garden up there near the coast. If you're using like a low growing manzanita, ground cover manzanita, for instance. So drought tolerance is sort of relative. You know, is the plant in its original community? Then you can start talking about real drought tolerance, and outside of its community, you, depending on what you've done, where you've moved it to, you might see different drought tolerance sort of adaptations from the plant to protect itself. So we're talking basically, if you take a plant that's is expecting a little more moisture and you put in a dry, arid area, you're going to see it really work on its adaptations. And likewise, also, you know, drought tolerance doesn't mean the plant is going to look great during that period. It's going to use all its defenses to make it through that period when it is trying to survive. So I think I talked about that before, but it's a good thing to be reminded when we talk about irrigation and drought tolerance. So know your plants and their origins. Calscape.org is a great one. I use it all the time. It's like, you know, I just have to remind myself, I can't keep track of it all. So it's like, oh, where does this come from again? Oh yeah, okay. You see a little sliver along the coast, you're pretty sure you're going to have to make some adjustments for that plant if you're working inland, you know, things like that. Use your microclimates wisely. And then you can find information on Calscape, Theodore Payne, Las Politas, CaliforniaNativePlants.com, Inland Valley Garden Planner, which .org, which a lot of people don't know about, but it's a pretty neat site. And then lastly, next week, we'll start talking about CMIS and WUCOLs, which I can't remember what those stand for, but they're really helpful in understanding your plant and its evapotranspiration and how to plan for irrigating those plants during the summers and all year round, pretty much. So basically, you're going to keep track, you know, what affects your plant, site location, plant origination, soil texture, and infiltration rate, just like up here says it right here. Oh, and age of garden, true. Plant material, irrigation system, and soil, and I would say location, right? All right. Moving on, any questions? No questions, all right. Making sense so far. Hey, good news, everybody. No YouTube videos this week. Can't tell you how happy I am about that. That's just putting a smile on my face. Factors influencing irrigation needs. Plants have evolved to survive on varying amounts of water depending on the biotic and abiotic features of the landscape. So let's get into what that means. Abiotic, non-living. Soil texture type. So we talked about that and you guys did those tests. Understanding the rate of infiltration and how long the soil holds on to water is crucial for applying water at the correct frequency. True. So if you've got water that you guys all have, well, that's an overstatement already, but a lot of the tests that I saw have very fast draining soil. If you have that clay soil, you have to be careful about applying too much water too fast because the soil just can't absorb it. And there are strategies for managing that. Excuse me, I'm hearing teenagers out the back and I need to close the door. Okay. All right. Secondly, light, another abiotic factor, light, shade, heat, wind. Tree canopy brings large swaths of shade and slows water loss. Location and size of structures can also cast shade on that impact soil moisture. I mean, a lot of you are familiar with the north side of your house is shady, doesn't get as much sun. Your house is casting that shade. South side, like luckily, a lot of people I talk to, just, you know, we seem to be talking the same language because everybody comes in telling me they have a south facing slope, you know, so I know that people know what they're talking about. Topography and aspect, yeah, so north facing slopes are generally shadier. Canyons and slopes have varying water patterns. Slopes may reduce potential for water to infiltrate. Yeah, so applying the water properly on a slope is something you will need to learn how to do and to adjust for. If you're at the bottom of a canyon, you're going to be collecting a lot of water. If you're at the top of a slope, it's going to be hard to keep those plants hydrated. Plan accordingly. Also, something that is not mentioned here is concrete walls, your house walls, or some reflected heat. That would also be abiotic. Things to keep in mind, you know, heat island effect, how much asphalt, you know, stuff like that. Let's move on. Abiotic. Oh, we said wind, yeah. So Santa Ana winds, you're going to want to keep track, and if you hear that a Santa Ana wind is coming, that we'll be talking about this more, but you're going to want to irrigate beforehand. That increases your evapotranspiration. Biotic factors, so plant water uptake and transpiration. I don't think we ever truly defined evapotranspiration, but that's water loss from the soil, either directly out of the soil from radiation or through a plant, which is called transpiration. The combined effect of the water leaving the soil is called evapotranspiration. Okay, so if you hear me throwing that out, that's what that means. Let's see. So the plants, again, going back to the biotic features of your for your irrigation needs, the plant's going to take water up through the roots and transpire it through the leaves and the stomata. Age of plants and canopy cover. Gardens will be inefficient on water use until they are grown in. Establishing a garden takes almost as much water as a turf garden. So do not be surprised if your clients do not see water savings until the second year. Yeah, so that is something to contend with. You know, these baby plants, they need water to get through the summer. You can reduce, I'm going to say if you plant in the fall, it doesn't always work like this. We have to work year round, right? We can't just get all our work done in the fall and then take a vacation for starting in spring. So you get your plants in fall, you're most likely, and you'll see that you can back off on the watering as you enter summer. So instead, if you put your plants in summer, you're going to have to water every week. If you put your plants in fall, you're going to be able to back off and water those plants more like twice a month. We're talking about a brand new garden here. Mulch, let's see. Yeah, so you may be applying 30 to 50 inches of water during the first year on a brand new garden. We will talk about why we talk about inches versus gallons, but generally when we talk about applied water, we talk about inches rather than gallons, and we will be more specific about that later. Mulch will help keep water in the soil once it is there. We talked about that last week, but you may have to apply extra irrigation to pass through that layer of wood chips or bark. That's an experiment, a thing, you know, you may have to apply another quarter or even half hour to get through the mulch. If you're overhead watering, if you're watering by drip, that's not an issue. And you probably want to do a test and see how long it takes for the water to start actually hitting the soil. That is important to remember. Here we are. Any questions before I move on? No questions. Okay. Okay, so this is a big chart with a lot of words, and you guys could figure this out, but let's start with this big arrow. This is a basic guide, not to be used as an absolute rule. Local conditions such as soil type, sunshade will affect this schedule. And also the plant type. So let's start. Can you guys see my cursor wiggling around over fall planting? Yes, okay. So it starts here, fall planting, then you go down, then you go to winter planting if you were to plant in winter and down. So fall planting, if you're putting your new garden in fall, which is, we're getting there. You would probably, let's talk about 1 gallon plants in this case, okay? Because if you put a bunch of 4 inches in, it's going to be different. If you put in 5 gallon or 15 gallon plants, that might also be different. So let's talk 1 gallon plants. So you'll be watering once a week. Rough guide again. Moving into winter, and that depends on, of course, if we get rainfall, you're not going to have to water, depending on the rainfall. Moving into winter, once every 2 weeks or less. Depends on how fast that water's coming out of the soil. If it's, let's say it's a warm winter, use your best judgment. You got to keep that plant hydrated. It doesn't want to be sitting, soaking in water. We talked about this. It's a sawtooth wave. Water, dry down. It has to have that dry down. But if it's drying down too fast and after 2 weeks, it's really crusty, and you don't want to get into that situation. You want to help it get through the winter with as much water as it needs to grow healthily, and all the way into spring. Into spring, once every 2 weeks, again, use your best judgment. This is for a fall planting. Summer schedule. Now you can move in. Hopefully your plant has had a good, let's see, November through, 6-7 months of growth. Will have been able to, you'll see some growth, and you might be able to start backing off on your watering. And then following the next year, that's when you can really start seeing that savings once a month. Later on, they tell you, well, but to keep it fresh, you're going to want to do it every 3 weeks or so. So keep that in mind. There's a little inconsistency here, but yeah, you could get away with once a month. I think was it Phil, were you telling me that you water your garden once a month? No, that's somebody else. Somebody else was telling me they maintain their garden, water once a month to keep it going.
That was me, Eric.
Okay. Thank
you,
Nathaniel. Yeah.
Come summer.
Okay. Yeah, through the summer. And then it starts talking about, okay, winter. Once every 2 weeks or less. That's interesting. So it's saying if you, that I find odd, that if you plant in, I think that must be a typo. That would be once a week still. If you plant it in winter, unless it's raining, I would water once a week. If we're not getting rain, you have to apply it. Moving into the spring, I would still go once a week, and then I would maybe start stretching it out in summer every 2 weeks. Spring planting, once a week. Yeah, that's interesting about the winter. Once a week, once every 2 weeks moving into the fall. So if you plant in spring, plan still. You're gonna have to water that garden once a week in summer. If it's a brand new garden, 1 gallon plants. And then summer, if you decide to put your plants in, I don't know, what are we calling summer? July through August? Then plan on having to water more frequently. Select your plants properly. We'll talk a little bit about that, about plants that you might actually be able to put in the summer and plants that you might avoid. And then once you, almost all of them, if you see at the bottom, in order to keep them going, what you might be able to get through watering them once a month to keep them fresh looking. You might still see some drought adaptations in that period. It'd have to be your judgment as to how much of that you will tolerate. Any questions on the chart?
Can you just,
Yeah.
can you just, you were saying that the winter planting should be once a week, winter, then spring once a week.
Yeah, I just don't see how you would plant in the fall and water once a week and then winter every 2 weeks, unless you've got moist soil. If you got moist soil, you're planting in moist soil, you don't need to overload the soil, but it's still, the root ball can dry out a little and you might want to water that. I would water that plant probably once a week still.
And summer, you would drop down to once every 2 weeks in the winter planting column.
Yeah, it's a case by case basis. Again, it's a rough guide, but it gives you an idea of, oh, I can back off here. But if you've got a brutal summer, or your plants haven't really shown what you're expecting out of them, again, then you're gonna keep an eye on the temperature. You're gonna give the plants their water before that big heat wave, hopefully the week before. And luckily we've got pretty, just the average weather apps are they're pretty solid. You can look I can look a week in advance and know, oh, I should water this week, or avoid it this week, or avoid it this week if we're going to have really high temperatures. Again, if your plant is flagging though, just sad and wilting in the morning, that plant needs water. Don't expect it to get through that hot period without watering. This is in your book, so you can kind of poke around on this thing at your leisure. All right. When natives want water and why? Wow, when, that's a lot of W's. I think that's cruel. Oh, okay. Before we get into this, let's talk about the schedule. So if you're planting plants in the summer, and I think there is a list of plants that can handle some summer planting. I'm not seeing it. Well, let's quickly talk about that. So summer planting's more challenging. I have to look at my notes while I talk to you, or I'm going to forget something. Inland is more challenging. Coastal, a little more forgiving. You're not getting the temperatures that you're going to get inland. And then mid-city is a little more on the coastal vibe. But if you're in a place where you're hitting 100 degrees, that's definitely inland, and you're going to want to be careful. So plants you can put in the summer pretty reliably, riparian plants, which often require shade and a lot of water. So plants that require year-round water are going to be able to handle some summer planting. Desert plants, cacti, agave, various desert plants, you just have to take a walk through some of them and see what they are. Abutilon palmieri, Sphaerosia ambigua, so your mallows, your desert lavenders, things like that. Some desert baccharis, things like that can handle some summer planting. Warm season grasses, so when those grass, I put some grass in July, and warm season, it was hot in my parkway. Watered it 4 inches twice a week, sometimes 3. They did great. So warm season grass can handle that. Muhlenbergia is another example of that. Spirobolus, another plant, warm season grass that can handle that summer planting, full sun. Part shade plants. You can put some part shade plants in the summer. Use your part shade to your advantage. Hopefully it's the afternoon shade, not the morning shade, and then the beaming down hot sun if you're inland. I talk a lot about inland because, Theodore Payne, we're in Sunland, and we get all the weather over here. Again, in coastal, a little more forgiving. Plants that you might avoid are the plants that we talk about being generally difficult with water. You're going to want to avoid those in the summer. So Trichostoma lanatum, the woolly blue curls, known to be difficult with water, even on the best year, so trying to coax that thing through the summer is going to be difficult if you plant in the summer. Ceanothus, manzanita, dendromecon could be difficult inland. Oaks, I wouldn't start an oak. Although I've kept oaks going through the summer, but really good drainage. If you got your heart set on it, sometimes I tell people, well, if I was designing a garden, I would avoid it. But if somebody's just like, I want to try this and see if I can get it going, hey, give it a shot. Amuse yourself during the summer. You might have some luck and keep it going. But I would try not to get that 24-inch box in the ground. Some of you guys with more experience might have a different experience, but I don't know if I'd put that 24-inch oak, really expensive, in the ground in summer. Fremontodendron, last one, difficult, known to be difficult with water. Wouldn't try that in the summer. Okay. When natives want water and why? www. Native plants love rain and they grow during the rainy season. The rainy season is described as fall, winter, spring. Maybe not spring. So November through March, we have historically the rainy season starts in November, carries on through March. We all know that's subject to yearly change. As a general rule, it is time for an irrigation, a deep soak when the soil has become dry at a depth of 3 to 4 inches. So yes, keep that in mind. If you're putting a plant in the fall and it's a 1 gallon, I'm gonna say 1 plant. Let's say you're hand watering 1 plant and you give that plant 3 to 5 gallons of water. And in a week, you dig down and the soil is dry 3 to 4 inches down. It's time to water that plant again. If let's just say there's no rain, nothing, in a week, it's time to dry. This is your dry down period. It dries down to 3 to 4 inches. And then if it's still wet up there, don't bother. Maybe your soil holds moisture. Maybe the temperatures are low. Maybe you're by the coast and you're getting a lot of fog. If it's still moist, don't worry about it. Maybe check your root, the top of the can and the root ball. If that looks dry, I might water again. If it looks really dry and spongy, it's best not to let that root ball dry out too much. But that's a good guide, 3 to 4 inches down. And whether you could also say if you're irrigating through sprinklers, if you're doing it through drip line. Try to water early in the morning or late in the evening. Check your plants first thing in the morning to evaluate their water needs. Yeah. So check in the morning, once a week, but it's, your soil. So a lot of you have sandy soil. If you put your plant in the ground and you dig down 3 days later and it's dry, you best believe you got to water that plant. So this is a general guide, but know your soil. If your soil is dry, you got to water it, let's see, try to water early in the morning. Yeah, I prefer watering in the morning. Most people I know do water in the morning. In the evening, you have a chance of, because of the, possibly depending on what time of year you're planting and the weather, you could run into some heat and fungal issues if you are watering in the evening. Imagine, you're watering in the evening during the summer, that soil's still really warm. It's pretty warm outside. That's a situation for pathogens. So I think I mentioned that before. Just keep that in mind. So let stuff cool down and then water. Check guidelines for watering times. I guess that means, know your plant. Okay, let's go. Whoop. How to water natives. When water, yeah, okay, here we are. Okay, here's quick. If we are replicating wet years of a Mediterranean climate during the establishment phase. So yeah, we talk about a good wet year being 15 inches of rain during the 5 months of the rainy season here in Southern California. November, December, January, February, March. If you look at the records, that's you might get some rain in April. I think we even got rain in June last year or this year. But you can't rely on it. You can't even rely on water during the rainy season, to be honest with you. But I think we're kind of learning that. So what we do, and I don't know if this is the time. Yeah, we're going to talk about this, but basically the 15 inches a rainy season averages out to 3 inches of rain a month. And what we do is, if we're not getting that 3 inches of rain, we supplement it with our irrigation. If you're getting 3 inches of rain, that's great. If you If we get 1 inch, then you have to add the extra 2 inches in there to get your plant through that period, through this wet period that last year we got approximately 5 inches of rain. We had to water all winter. So it's important to keep that in mind. Depending on the maturity of your garden. Again, we'll talk about that later, but keep that in mind. 3 inches of rain a year, if it's not there, you have to add it. You will want to water as deeply and infrequently as possible without causing the plant stress. Water heavily, at least 2 feet down, and allowing good dry down between watering cycles. That's that sawtooth wave I was talking about. And the amount of water, you want that water to go down. It says at least 2 feet, 18 to 24 inches. Okay. While you should understand and utilize controllers, don't rely too heavily on an automatic timer, especially in winter. Expect to adjust these on a fairly regular basis, once a quarter. Yeah, so you have to adjust according to the age of the garden you're putting in, the weather, you know, that's what you're adjusting your timer to. And if you just set your timer on automatic, you might not be aware of what's going on with your soil. So it's really important to get your hands in there, understand what's happening with your soil. After a while, yeah, you could make an argument, and you know, nobody's looking over you. You can make an argument. I really understand the soil, and I know this water needs to go in here at this period. But for a while, you're going to have to learn your site. Yeah, LADWP offers a rebate for the use of a soil probe. A soil probe is a thing that looks like a pogo stick, and it creates a core of soil, and I'll try to remember to bring it down. It can be really useful, and it can be hard to use. If you've got a really compact soil, you're going to have trouble getting that thing down in there. Tim, head of horticulture, bent the one we had because he was jumping on it trying to get it into the soil. So that's just a FYI, and they're surprisingly expensive. $100+ for a cheap one, $200 for another one, and they make some that you can pound with a mallet to get them down in there. I guess I haven't really used one at that level. I would imagine on some really hard soil, you'd have to really, you know, crank away at it. You can, I don't know if they offer, and what that can do is just tell you how deep your moisture is going. You water, you run your soil probe, you can do it before and after and see, you can see if, you know, get the visual on how deep your water is going. Flora at TPF recommends you just put an absorbent type of stick down into the ground, and you can check your soil that way. You just want to make sure it's not too absorbent, so when you're pulling it up, it's gathering moisture, but you do it quick enough, I don't think that would be an issue. And then if you decide to use a moisture meter, those are generally designed according, I don't use those, we don't use those at TPF. Tim, who has a lot of experience in agriculture, says they use that a lot for agriculture. They're very expensive, and good ones cost like $1,000, but you can get cheaper ones and get a rough idea. But don't use that as your only tool. The idea is to equate what the meter's telling you versus what you're feeling in your hands. Okay, moving on. Know your watering days is pretty straightforward. Depending on your location, they may have restrictions on the days you can water. And know, depending on your delivery system, watering, circled here, watering with sprinklers is limited to one cycle of up to 8 minutes per station per watering day for standard sprinkler systems, typical residential system, 2 15-minute cycles per watering day for water conserving nozzle sprinkler systems. They must have a definition in there about what water conserving are. So those would be on the probably lower than 1 inch per hour. Anybody have any thoughts on, comments on that? Okay, so TPF, majority of our heads put out 0.44 inches per second, or per second. That's amazing. Per hour, and that would be considered a low flow watering system. Okay, delivery system. We're really moving through this. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back. Any questions? If you have any questions, maybe put them in the chat if we're oh, wow, there's a lot of chat going on here. Oh, okay, let me just look through this chat really quickly. Wallace is $80. So let that, hi everyone. Yeah, so the soil infiltration tests, yeah, that's complicated, right? Because if you, they talk about, again, I think I mentioned some want you to water it once and then water it again. So it might not be bad to try that as well and see if you get a different result. Oh, Compostina for soil test. Here's a $20 soil test. Thank you, Emilio. John says, was looking forward to class on Saturday, won't be able to make it. Okay. Haha. So John is also teaching. We're going to miss out on him. Somebody asks, oh yeah, recordings for lesson 3 and 4 will be available. Talk to Anjali about that and she'll get back to you. I'm wondering if the PowerPoint presentation will be available for download as it contains great information not included in the handbook. Yeah, I don't think so, Emilio. But I, you know, you might have to revisit, copy from the videos. Oh, Anjali said she'll check. I don't have a problem with it, but I'm not running the program. Yeah, Ed is confirming. I hear it's bad to water in the summer on warm soil. Can I use an auger type of soil probe that screws into the ground? But yes, more expensive. Oh, you can use, but best if you're performing a lot of soil sampling. Okay, that's a good tip. I'm going to put my email again, Eric at ERIK at Theodore Payne. .org. Sometimes I misspell Theodore Payne, so that's a FYI. Okay, irrigation starts, I think one class is at 8:30. The other class is at 8:30 to 10. The other one starts 10:30 to 12. Yeah. Stephanie, it would be better if you go to the 10:30 class. Talk to Angeli for specifics about that. It's just, it gets crowded walking around the garden with everybody. I want to make sure people get a chance to ask their questions, be able to see everything that we're doing. I'm going to be back in 2 minutes just to stop talking for a second. Unmute. Okay, there we are. Okay, everybody back? Yes, I see people get that refreshment. Okay. I'm gonna pop in on this chat once in a while, but it's kind of hard to focus when the chat, I don't mind if you guys do chats, but I may not pay attention to it all the time. All right, so delivery systems. Oh, let's quickly, I think I skipped a couple of my own notes on here, but when you're putting that new, I think I mentioned it, but I'm going to say it again, just to be clear. When you're putting, now this is that discrepancy, right? Gallons per versus inches. In this case, if you're putting a 1 gallon plant in the ground, we recommend that you put 3 to 5 gallons on that plant when you water. I mentioned this last week, but I'm going to say it again. It's really important. It needs a lot of water on the first, and the first couple times you're really going to want to do that. get that 3 to 5 gallons. I'll show you my little invention tomorrow. I use a 5-gallon nursery bucket, and I put little tubes in it, and that gives you 3.5 gallons, applies it slowly, and that seems to be good enough. And I'll show you that tomorrow. And so that delivers 3.5 gallons, and that's a good, depending on the soil and the slope and all of that stuff, you need to make sure the water's going into the ground, not running down the slope. But make sure, and then depending on your delivery, in that case, that's a manual delivery system. But let's see. Yeah, so that's our recommendation when you're putting those plants in, the first couple of waterings. Okay, here we go, delivery systems. Okay, I love restating things. Delivery system is how you get water to the plants, right? You're hand watering, you're drip irrigating, your or your overhead watering. It's the system you irrigate with. This, just a reminder, this is not about how to install or design an irrigation system. This is about how to adapt or use the one that you have, or that your client has. So if you want to get into install, that's another class. You want to adjust the existing system to promote optimum plant health. Here's a good time. I will quickly give you the formula. We'll revisit it, don't worry. But you're gonna want to write this down when we get to the slide that has the formula. Write it down. I'm really surprised it's not in your book, so write it down. Basically, 1 gallon of water equals 1.6 inches of water. So a gallon equals 1.6 inches. And we learn how to do those calculations later in the class, and that's part of your homework. So we're putting quite a few inches down when we actually first water the plant, but we need to make sure that water goes down 18 to 24 inches. All right, here's cycle soak or pulse irrigation. Depending on your field conditions and delivery systems, a cycle and soak approach can reduce runoff and increase infiltration by segmenting your total runtime into smaller intervals of water application. You can also utilize multiple start times at 30-minute intervals if your system doesn't already have this mode available. So if it doesn't do the cycle soak, you just have to reset. You set your controller to go off, soak in for a couple hours, go again, soak in, go again. If you have that kind of that dense soil where the water runs off, you can't have it running down. You're going to waste water. You're going to lose nutrients. You're going to lose mulch if you water on a soil that can't accept. You don't want to overwhelm your soil's ability to take on moisture. So that's something to keep in mind. And you can do that through these cycle soak. So sometimes, depending on the soil, you can run it in 5-minute increments. 5 minutes, let it soak in. 10, it might take a test, but 5 minutes, let it sit for 10 minutes or maybe a half hour, run it again. 10 minutes might not be long enough. Anybody have experience with trying to apply moisture in this way on a garden? Meryl, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I'm really super fussy about watering because water is such a precious resource. And I think that the cycle and soak is like the simplest and easiest way to get water deep. It's sorry about the baby, you guys. I talk a lot, so he talks a lot. Yeah, it's like a big pet peeve of mine when I see like, you know, water, like the surface top 2 inches reach its saturation point and then everything else runs off and like is watering the hardscape. The hardscape's not going to grow. So there's no point in doing that.
Yeah.
But cycle and soak just like gives the water a chance to go where you want it to go, which is like right there at the roots of the plants. And
Yeah.
I can't say enough great things about it, you know?
What would you say your application, so your resting period between the soaks?
So we actually, nowadays, the technology is so great. We use these smart sensors that will like figure out what the evapotranspiration is in the area. And we put the irrigation for the winter on kind of high, like a pretty frequent watering. And like it's a real winter and like it's getting rain, and then it'll just shut it off or dial it down if it's, you know, cool or not a lot of rain, or if it's cool or if there's a lot of rain, it'll just shut it off. And then
when you cycle soak, what's so as you're applying, you apply it for a certain number of minutes, then you let it rest, then you apply it. What's your experience with the resting time? Or you're saying the sensor kind of knows how to apply it?
Oh, we'll do like three cycles for 60 minutes if it's drip irrigation. If it's spray, we might go like 20 minutes.
Okay.
And it kind of knows, like we'll say, okay, we want to run this station for 7 minutes total. So it'll divide it up and be like 2 minutes, 20 minutes off, 2 minutes, 20 minutes off.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys caught what she's saying. You run it, let it soak in. 2 minutes on, let it soak in for 20 minutes. 2 minutes on, let it soak in to get the total 7 minutes or 6 or whatever, however many minutes the garden needs. Okay, so quickly, yeah, you can also, we talk about a rain event. The goal is to achieve a good rain event. You can apply that over the course of more than one day. We don't do that here. We get really good at TPF. We have pretty good soil texture we have soil that absorbs moisture pretty quickly. So that's an option. Does anybody ever do that? You can total. So if you water, if you're trying to get the way I could see this working is if you're trying to work within the parameters of LADWP, they have short watering times. And if you're trying to get a full rain event across, a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you're trying to work within the limits of the system, you can consider that one rain event across, that's 5 days, but still that's considered one rain event. You'll lose a little, you'll have a little evapotranspiration, but it shouldn't be enough to really affect the overall outcome. Okay, moving on. Sprinklers. Okay, high volume, AKA overhead. Sprinkler nozzles and their pluses and minuses. Pros and cons. Rotary, stream, misting, etc. Deliver water at variable precipitation rates from 0.44 inches on the low end to well over 3 inches per hour. So we talk about the precipitation rate. This is the place where we talk a little bit about, or do we? Yeah, we want to talk about the so your inches per hour, that's precipitation rate. The reason we talk about that is because that's an overall garden measurement rather than a sort of per head measurement or a total system measurement. You're talking about the inches you're putting down on a garden and knowing your infiltration rate. Yeah, I got lost. Sorry. Anyway, now where am I? Anyway, referring to the inches per minute, that's called your precipitation rate. And when you look at specs on a head or your drip line, which we'll talk about in a second, that's done. Actually, drip line is done by gallons per minute, but they talk about it per square footage as infiltration rate. So let's move on to the thing before I mangle this anymore. The pros of overhead sprinklers, easy to fix within reason. They're kind of like Legos, and if somebody kicks a head, you just unscrew it and you put a new one on. Problem can be if the break happens farther down underneath the soil in the pipe, then you have to dig it out and do some shenanigans to fix that pipe. That can be a little more difficult. It replicates rain, so it replicates the natural rainfall, and where the plants want it, they want it to come generally from above, unless you're in a riparian situation. That's a whole different deal. But most plants, and they have their canopies developed to accept water from the top. It's easy to achieve DU, distribution uniformity. So that means the whole garden gets watered equally at whatever inches per hour you're applying. Can be put on pop-ups, yeah, so they can disappear. You see this all the time. You guys know this, that you can get them up over your plants and spray from above. The cons: does not qualify for turf replacement, can be inefficient, leads to runoff and more evaporation. Yeah, you can lose moisture to the air if you have a strong wind. You can get runoff no matter what system you use, so you have to use your system wisely. Foliar disease issues, yeah, if you're applying, sometimes if you get the leaves of a plant wet, you can get those foliar diseases like powdery mildew. That would be like on a hummingbird sage, or you can see it on a white sage sometimes. You can get it on St. Catherine's lace, Eriogonum giganteum, and even Salvia clevelandii can get that foliar disease. Just keep in mind that also has to do with how much airflow you have. So if you have a tightly compacted garden, your overhead watering, and the plant is susceptible to that foliar disease, you can be creating the conditions if you're watering overhead for it to get those fungal diseases. Okay.
Eric, can I ask you something?
Sure.
This is Maggie. The SoCal Water Smart website gives a rebate for a rotator head sprinkler, you know, the rotating nozzles. So
you mean changing them out?
For putting them in.
Oh, okay.
It's a lower, you know, it's a more efficient water delivery. And I know that LADWP says that you can't have any overhead sprinklers, but there's a lot of confusion in my mind because the SoCal Water Smart says that you can use rotator head sprinklers, just not like solid spray. And the LADWP says in a very simple statement, no overhead sprinklers. And they're both, you know, the SoCal Water Smart is kind of coordinating all the water districts and has the list of rules, but then you go to your water district and they might have other rules.
Yeah.
But those rotator head sprinklers are eligible for a rebate in themselves. And I'm pretty sure I've read several times on the WaterSmart website that the turf rebate allows those. It allows, it says it allows drip, micro spray, blah, 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 and the rotating nozzles. So it would be so good if LADWP would figure that out.
Make
and
it very
not tell
clear.
people to take out their sprinklers, because just, you know, converting them would be.
Yeah. Good news. We're going to have a representative of LADWP here next week presenting the turf replacement program. And that person will be able to hopefully answer those questions.
Awesome. Stephanie said in the chat, it does allow them in it. Yes. Anyway, that'll be great to get some clarification. I wish they would correct their materials.
Yeah.
If that's
Yeah,
true.
if the materials aren't correct, we're going to have to look at that. So thank you. And hopefully we'll get a really clear answer.
Can I
Next
check
week. Yes.
I think the rotors, from what I understand from the EPA class I took, the rotors have a big drop of water that's less likely to evaporate and more likely to land where it is. So in terms of efficacy,
Yes.
drip is 95%, spray is 75%, and rotors is like 90%.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. The MP rotators or MP rotors. Yeah. They have the bigger water blob sending out. Okay. Let's move on to drip. Drip systems. It's a low volume point source, a grid pattern inline. So inline refers to a tube of that's a drip tube. What do we call it? And about every foot, it has an emitter. Okay. And then the point source is you have a solid tube and you pop into that and you apply those, whatever head you're putting on the end to your plant. And you have to be really careful with that. You have to be really careful with both to make sure you get the distribution uniformity, and we discuss that later down here. So quickly, let's talk about, you have to know, the average I know about is 0.6 per hour, and but they make different rates of, and like I said, it comes out at gallons per hour, but when you look at the recommended use on the manufacturer's website, they recommend it, use it in a grid, and that gives you the inches per hour. And you got to make sure that, yeah, I'll move on. The pros, they're efficient, especially under mulch. You're not watering the mulch. Okay, fantastic. You're not using that extra half hour to water the mulch. Qualifies for turf replacement rebate. True. Can run much larger zones. Yeah. I suppose that's because you're not outputting, it depends on the heads, I think, that you're using. It's really what that's referring to. So if you have a high volume heads and you're using up the valve with your high volume heads, you can actually get a larger space covered by your drip. Any arguments with that from those of you who do this on a regular basis? I first want to just say caveat. I work with installed systems I haven't done a lot of design on my own, so some of this stuff is a little foggy for me. So I apologize if I'm not clear, and that's why I refer to some of the people that have a little more experience.
I
Is that,
can speak to this. This
yeah,
is true. The reason is when you're doing a spray system, you have to get head-to-head coverage for it to work properly, right? Otherwise you
right.
get brown spots. So when you have all that, you have a lot of water leaving the system. And if you were to add too many of those spray heads,
Right.
the ones at the end of the longest line are just going to tinkle, and the ones closer are going to spray more, but they're not going to achieve the reach that you want. So you have to kind of like limit it to, a rule of thumb is like 200 to 300 square feet. When you go to drip systems, there's, all the point source emitters are, they're all like equalized. So as long as there's enough pressure, it's going to work. And then you can kind of like create a tree off of main lines. So the water just, it's easier to distribute it equally to further reaches, and you can max it out more like 700, 800 square feet. Of course, it's going to depend, and you're going to go to like the plants themselves. So if you have big plants and small plants all on the same zone, I mean, these are just broad ballparks, right? But think about it too, like if you have a couple of big plants and then some smaller plants and medium-sized plants, you're going to be able to stretch it out even further than if you have, those drip lines every 6 inches apart.
True. Yeah, that's okay. Really good points. So going back just quickly, to achieve your distribution uniformity on your sprinklers, and this gets into that design thing, but look at your manufacturer's specs. They tell you that, so if these are 2 heads, the one has to reach this head, and this one has to reach this head in order to reach that precipitation rate that's on the manufacturer's specs. That's really important to remember. So if they're barely overlapping, that's not going to give you that precipitation rate. And you can see that on the MP Rotator website. Yeah, and it reminds me, at TPF, we had a zone that was doing exactly what Merrill said. At the end of the line, the heads were just barely shooting out, and we basically took every other head out and increased the flow rate for the whole system for that zone.
Eric,
yes.
you're really talking about, I mean, we're starting to get into design and hydraulics. So, but I will say one thing is that a lot of manufacturers do provide great tables that will tell you, how many heads you can put in a certain size pipe. And same thing with drip irrigation. I mean, there's a lot of really good, concise information that the manufacturers are providing for folks these days. They're taking a lot of guesswork out of it. So
Okay, thank you, John. Yeah, I get a little sidetracked. We try to relay information. Cons, drip line breaks can be hard to detect. Yes, so sometimes they'll break, and it'll be happening under the mulch. You might not notice for a while. Sometimes it'll dig a hole for you and you'll see it. Sometimes you'll see runoff. Sometimes it'll spray up in the air. It can be susceptible to critters like squirrels. They love drip line and getting in there and making holes in your drip line. They need water. So that is something that pay attention to. Somewhat challenging to achieve distribution uniformity. As John said, look on the manufacturer's website. Generally, this was originally developed for agriculture use, and they kind of talk about using a grid pattern, but we're not putting our gardens in on drips. You're doing a windy thing, and you just want to make sure that your plant gets a proper number of emitters in order to achieve that distribution uniformity. If you apply an emitter only on one side of a plant, your plant might suffer. Or if you've done your irrigation and you go in and you're saying something's wrong with this plant, usually investigating, oh, it's not getting enough, it doesn't have enough emitters around it. Many times that is the answer. Must use manual irrigation to mist foliage. Yeah, so if you want to get a refresh, if you want to just do a little 2-minute refresh on your garden, just to freshen it up, you got to do it by hand with a hose, I suppose, if you don't have overheads. Drip practical tip: understand your wetting patterns based on soil and be able to convert or have handy the manufacturer's application rate charts. Remember, point source emitters deliver water at one focal point in the landscape, and you may need to add emitters as the garden and plants age and grow. True. So make sure and avoid putting the emitter too close to the crown of the plant. So you want to keep the emitter around the perimeter of that original root ball, and that should do the trick. Let's see, what else are we saying here?
Can I ask a question? Real
Sure.
quick? Is it advised to change the drip line circle as the plant grows? Like in a couple of years,
Yeah.
dig it back up and move it?
Generally, yes, it is advised. I also will tell you that when I show you the TPF, we haven't changed that drip line. So it's on a grid and we haven't changed that, and the plants are looking fine. It's just you really want to make sure you're not too close to the crown of the plant on the original application.
Yeah.
We also have really good draining soil, so that doesn't seem to be an issue
Okay.
in our case. Okay, moving on. Here's an example of your, let's see. Yeah, so you've got your 0.6 gallons per hour drip line, and they expect you to put it on a 12-inch grid, and that gives you 0.96 inches per hour. And here's the, I'll give you guys time to write that down if you want to. Precipitation rate, inches over hour, gallons per hour times 1.605. That's that quick formula I told you before. Okay. And then you want to keep in mind your soil. So if you've got sandy soil, your water's just going to percolate a lot faster. If you got that clay soil, you're going to get the capillary action, which is the more horizontal, and it's going to take longer to get down to that 24 inches. So in this case, we don't know what kind of clay soil this is, but it takes, in this case, it takes 4 hours to get 24 inches down. Whereas with this sandy soil, it looks almost like 30 minutes to get 24 inches down. So it's going to affect your run time and your frequency. Okay. Practical tips: many native plants will benefit from infrequent, deeper irrigation post-establishment during the dry season. Many will not take irrigation. So yeah, know your plants. That goes back to what kind of plant are you putting in? Is it a difficult plant with water in the warm season? And then this kind of relates to if you have a sort of garden that has many mature plants and then you put in a lot of new plants. Well, if you're also irrigating the mature plants, you're gonna irrigate for the mature plants, and then you're gonna have to make sure that those new plants get the water they need as well. So a lot of times what we'll do is water every 2-3 weeks for the mature plants, and then we go in and water the individual new plantings. Those are more like once a week. And that's a hand watering situation for us. You might devise a different scheme. On new plantings and young gardens, you may need to water lightly in between and in addition to the deep soak irrigations. This is particularly true if you're planting new plants in a mature garden. So I just said that, find the balance. And then of course, if you have 4 inches versus 1 gallons, you're gonna have to water those 4 inches differently than the 1 gallons. They're gonna need water more regularly. On any garden, light refreshing sprinkles will freshen the plants, wash the leaves, and keep the soil surface a little cooler and somewhat moist. It's important to remember this is not a rain event. This is not an irrigation event. This is a strategy for just kind of keeping the plants, keeping the dust off the plants, maybe freshening them up a little bit, but that would be like a 2 to 5 minute thing. And it's not an irrigation event. It's just sort of a aesthetics thing. Okay, irrigation by the numbers. Let's see if I've missed any big points here. So yeah, just to double restate this slide, you're balancing the infiltration rate and the delivery rate. Okay, so sandy soil or clay soil, that's your infiltration rate, or you know by digging that hole. And then the delivery rate is your inches per hour. Okay. We are irrigation by the numbers. Okay. Winter months bring 15 inches. Yeah, we talked about this. So 15 inches between November and March. This is the level of rain that is sustainable for a native garden, but extra summer irrigation will keep plants hydrated and attractive. Yeah, that would be considered for your established garden. You're still going to have to extra summer irrigation. You're going to have to do that for sure if you're establishing a garden. Generally 0 to 1.5 inches per rain event every 21 days during the April through October months, the dry season. This equals 15 inches of applied irrigation. It depends on soil, plant type, exposure, drought stress, tolerance. Yeah, all of those things indicate how often you might decide to apply that summer irrigation. Let's see. 1 gallon of water per square foot, that is approximately what 1.5 inches of rain. So it's really 1.6 if you're trying to be really accurate about your application. Here's an example of how the water fell. They don't say, but what year, but let's say an average year. And we get some rain, about 1 inch in November, then 2 inches in December, and then we hit January, February, and March. A lot of rain, and then it drops off steeply April, and then through this period is where you need to apply that extra summer irrigation, depending on your plant's needs, evapotranspiration rate, the age of the garden, all of that good stuff. This just kind of illustrates why you might need to do that. And that would be more for a mature garden. We know you're going to have to irrigate in the summer for a brand new garden. Practical tips. If you have a dry winter, add more irrigation water to equal the average total for your area. Yeah, so it depends on the plant community you've chosen, depends on your location and your site. I mentioned that. If you have 2 inches of rain going back here to December, 2 inches of rain in December, you're going to want to apply that extra inch. I'm guessing that the rain didn't all fall on the same day. It may have, but look at your forecast. If you're scheduling these timers manually, it sounds like some of these probes work pretty well. We don't use them here at TPF. That's why I don't speak on them that much. And then, yeah, so we make sure we apply that 3 inches per, and then of course, January, February, March, the system is off. Nothing pleases me more than turning that system off. But then when we hit, it's dry in April, we want to continue this through the spring and into July or into the summer months. But we adjust our frequency accordingly. Practical tips: if you have dry winter, blah, 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 remember how to get ahead of, keep your eye on the weather report. If you've got something, if you got the probe that does it automatically for you, that's one thing. I kind of just always look at the weather and keep ahead of those extreme heat events during the summer. So I think I mentioned we got into a nice balance where the heat would come, and then the next week the irrigation would go on, and then the heat would come, then the irrigation. But usually it would be more like I'd be looking ahead. Oh, there's a heat event coming. It's going to be 100 degrees. Let me water during this period when it's 85 to get those plants some water beforehand. If you have a wet winter, keep the irrigation system turned off until 2 to 4 weeks after the last big rainfall, then restart the irrigation system. Like I said, that feels good when you do that. Practical tips: if you have sandy soil, expect to increase the frequency of irrigation. I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over and over again in different ways. You guys get it. First year, somewhere between 30 and 50 inches of water from natural rainfall and irrigation water. Yeah, so your first year, you're watering a lot, hand watering may be necessary in the first several months. Increased labor rates apply. So if you're doing this as a business, understand that. And then if you're working in a situation, say it's a school, whatever, schedule your volunteers accordingly. Like, make sure they know, hey, great, thanks for the help putting the plants in. And we need some dedication to make sure these plants get watered. And here's how we do it, and here's how we're checking for that water. I see that happen a lot where it just kind of gets left off. Let's see if I missed anything. Oh yeah, the other reason why you're watering in the summer is it's so that, one thing is you're avoiding total dormancy. Depending on the plant, the situation, you're trying to avoid, unless you're in a xeric situation where you just don't want to add that extra water after the first year, and you want to, you just want to conserve the resource. Just know that those plants, and I mentioned this, are going to use all their adaptations, and they may not look, they may not have that lively, bouncy look. They may have that crispy, hiding out look. And you can just go up on top. If you're not familiar what that is, you can look at our garden on the grounds of Theodore Payne when you come in tomorrow. And then you can also go up at the top of Wildflower Hill, and we have a lot of natives up there. We have a lot of buckwheat and salvias, and those plants get no irrigation. You see them in full. We have some Camellia, beautiful, lovely plant in spring, but man, it looks dead at this time of year, and you have to be willing to tolerate that and know your client about how that works. And that's why we apply the irrigation during the summer. If your goal is to have a little fresher looking garden. some plants will go dormant no matter what. Diplicus is a really good example. You can apply as much water as you want, and I haven't really seen that Diplicus, look fresh all year round. They just go dormant in the summer. So just be aware of that. It's hard to know without getting some of that experience. And then the danger of that is you keep watering it. The kind of mistake with Diplicus is, oh, it's looking sad, it's looking crusty, and it's hard to know, is this just a plant that insists on going dormant? In the case of a Diplicus, so a monkey flower, that is absolutely true. And no matter how much water you apply, that thing's not coming back until the winter and spring. Let's see. Yeah, okay. And then you might consider, you've got your plants that are finicky for summer water. You don't have those on the same zone that the plants that need water. So you create a zone or design your system so that, your Fremontodendron is off in the corner and not getting that summer water that you're applying to other plants. Yeah, that's planning. Let's see, practical tips. Oh, here's a quick example of Pasadena. May, looks like, we don't know what year this was, but here's the rainfall, measured rainfall in July, August, September, October, November. And they skipped May and June, but we're going to say it was minimal. So in November, usually, and this is an interesting chart because here's the rainfall, the actual rainfall from November. If you scoot over here to the right, the monthly normal is 1.1. And so if you wanted to be really technical about it, you would apply 1 inch of rain, 1.03 inches of rain for that month. I would probably give them a little more than that if I was trying to grow a new garden. Well, I definitely would. So this is just illustrates that thing of, and then here's the accrual as the year goes on of how much water you actually didn't get. Here's the normal. Pasadena gets, in this case, 20 inches of rain, and you can see it. It's accruing here on a normal year. This is how much water you're getting as you go down through the months. And then here's what you didn't get. You didn't get a total of 2 inches. You didn't get a total of 4 inches. That month, you missed 2 inches. In January, it rained 0.71. That's a really crucial month. Departure for the month, almost 4 inches. So you missed 4 inches of rain in January. You're going to want to adjust your irrigation accordingly. I hope, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And let's see. There are various places you can go to find those average rainfalls. One of them is the National Weather Service, so you can poke around on that. There's also that one, CMIS, and we'll get into that next week. Where to water? Water where the roots are. I hate this last sentence, and I wish it wasn't even here. Water where the roots are, where you want them to be, or where you know they should be as the plant matures. Well, that's a little odd. You don't want to water too far away from the root ball if it's a young plant. So you're going to water near where, that's where the roots are. Then you can water. This is why distribution uniformity, this is one place where it comes into play. You want to water, not just, you want to increase that circle that the plant, I'm sorry, my hands are down here. You want to increase that circle. Here's your plant, 1 gallon. You water, you get the root ball wet, and you get the surrounding surface wet. But as that plant grows and you see the canopy of the plant grow, you know, those roots are stretching out. So if you keep watering right at the base, it's never, I mean, they do pretty well, but you're not going to get quite as a vigorous plant, drought tolerant, working on its drought tolerance, than if you start to spread out your watering area. And then love this sentence, water the soil for it to give to the plants. Okay, yeah, that's my main goal, is to water the soil for it to give to the plants. Irrigating slopes. Slopes are a different world. We talked about that. There may be a need for terraces, so create those. You can either create big long terraces, or you just create a little platform for your plant to go in, and then so that the water will infiltrate, not just run down the hill. Little individual basins for each plant if you want to. If you're creating a path, you might, you know, that's design stuff, but then I think those platforms would be more part of your design. If you're installing irrigation, consider check valves and test that you are getting adequate water throughout the slope. I'm going to leave that alone. Use that on check your design skills for that. Here we are, homework time. Evaluate lesson number 4. So first, before we get into that, do we have any questions before? Oh, there's a poll. There is a poll. Where are the polls? If I go up here, here's a poll. Let's go to lesson 4. Okay, let's do this poll. We have a little time. We have a south-facing slope with sandy soils planted with newly transplanted small shrubs, let's say 1 gallon, and perennials in September in Sun Valley. South-facing slope, September, Sun Valley. I've decided to water 1.5 inches a month. In terms of watering, does this seem like A, a good amount, B, too much, C, too little? I'm gonna launch it. Hit me with your answers. Do you guys see this poll? Thumbs up, somebody? Yes, okay. Studying. We got 2, 14, 17 people. How many people are in class today?
25.
Wow, okay. Oh, 20 or 19 people. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll. We're at 20. Largely, I'm going to share the results. Okay, so we have 4 people that consider that a good amount. 0 people thought that was too much. And then 16 thought it was too little. I would kind of tend on the too little side as well. What are my reasons? South facing slope, a lot of sun, sandy soil. It's just running through that soil, right? It's not holding on to it. Newly transplanted shrubs. Did I say 1 gallon? In September. So September is still a very hot month, right? Sometimes we hit our peak of the year in September. Watering 1.5 once a month, that's all. Okay, so you could look at it this way, 3 gallons of water for that plant times 1.6 is what we would really recommend. And without doing the math really quickly, that's 4 something inches. That's 4 something inches for that newly transplanted planted plant. Remember, we talked about putting 3 to 5 gallons on that new plant, especially now we're on a sandy slope, Sun Valley. Oh, this sounds like, yeah, I'm very familiar with that. Okay, let's talk, let me get rid of that. Evaluate a client's irrigation system. What delivery system, make and model do they use? Using the manufacturer's spec sheet, find the precipitation rate and calculate how long to run the system to irrigate 1.5 inches. You're going to want to write, and what would your irrigation plan look like for the first year? You're going to want to write this calculation down. If a sprinkler has a precipitation rate of 2 inches per hour, how long do I water to wet 1 inch? You take the 1 inch, you divide it by 2 inches per hour, that gives you the 0.5 hours. Of course, all the ones I come up with are like 0.44 inches an hour and 0.88 inches an hour. They got to make the math a little more difficult. I'm really glad that John mentioned it wasn't just me. Go to your manufacturer specs site and there's always information on there. And it's just part of doing it right. Okay, is this clear, this assignment? Okay, and then thank you, Natalie. If you don't, so yeah, we don't all have clients, right? You could go to your neighbors and have an imaginary install on your neighbor's place. You know, make sure you get along with them because you're going to want to look at their irrigation heads, get the model numbers on there, get this, go to the website, investigate those model numbers, see how much they put out, you know, and then sort of design your system, you know. So if you got a thing that just a, you know, the MP rotators are 0.44 inches per hour. So go to the website, check those out. And is that clear enough? Am I making any sense? Am I talking to myself? Okay, awesome. Thanks for the thumbs up, everybody. Appreciate it. Luis, you got it? Awesome. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Luis sent in some very detailed pictures, and I'm sorry I couldn't get to those on this.
That's all good. Thank
thing,
you.
but you did a great job on your infiltration test.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I
Yeah.
hope I get this one right.
Yeah. It's you know, and just keep in mind, you know, like sometimes this stuff, it's a lot of, if you don't have a lot of experience with irrigation systems, it can take a while for it to sink in, you know. It doesn't all just always land right away. And it's like, oh, but what about this? But what about that? And then it gets explained a little more and a little more.
I'll be sure to ask you plenty of questions tomorrow. So
okay, yeah. And it sounds like we've got some pros who can, you know, I can tell you a lot about the TPF system, and then the pros can talk about, you know, their own systems that they put in. So with
Wonderful.
that, I'm ready to let you guys go.
Thank you.
Look at that, 6 minutes ahead. And tomorrow we're going to have some fun. Hopefully we can have those, we can answer questions, you know, and hopefully the questions will be answered just as we do the practices. Okay.
Danielle asked, and I'm also wondering, do we need to bring anything with us tomorrow?
If you have mason jars, everybody bring a mason, not everybody, but we could use 2 or 3. That would be handy. you know, and then we could do a little demo, couple different areas in the garden.
Eric,
All right. Yes.
what if your neighbor doesn't have a system? Can we just make one up, design one?
Yeah. Yeah. If
Okay.
you're just like stuck and you got nothing and you don't, you know, you're not a person who's going to go poking around in your neighbor's yard. I get it. Use that 0.44. Here's the company, Hunter MP Rotator. You're going to want to look those up. And let's just say it's the 1000 model. I love the thousands, right? MP, it's the 1000. It's orange. No, it's not orange, actually. Anyway, those will, that's a good place to start if you just don't have that irrigation. I don't have irrigation at my house. It's all hand watered at my house. So I know what you're talking about. So that's it. And
Eric,
yes,
I'm not gonna be able to make it tomorrow after all, so I'm wondering if you can take a picture of your 5-gallon bucket with tubing system that you talked about,
okay.
so I can see it.
Yeah, sure. No problem. I'll try to send that over to you.
No
Um,
worries.
Oh, sorry to miss you. Okay.
Yeah. Kids have a cross-country meet I didn't know about.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a long run. That's like
Yeah.
5,000 miles.
And
All
Eric,
right.
I have one more question.
Yes.
I just actually got back into town. I was in Baja for a while, and I'm wondering if I could just hand in all my homework at once.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
It's kind of about getting you to use your thinking parts, you know, and just get used to these ideas, you know. Okay.
Thanks.
Were you visiting Claire Acosta in Baja?
No, I have a home down there, about 2 hours
Oh,
south of
okay.
Ensenada.
Yeah, one of our teachers lives down in Baja. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Is that it? Everybody good? Sorry to miss the people that can't make it. And I trust you've all been looking at the chats and I didn't miss anything too significant. Yeah, we'll answer questions tomorrow. All right. Good night, everybody. Okay. Oh, wow. That's a nice cake.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay. Good night.
Night.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay. USGBC, are we here? Hi. Everything
Hi.
cool? We're all good? You want to stop the recording?
Yeah, we're good. I'm